resurrected back to life. Done my time and served my sentence. Dress me up and watch me die. If it feels good, tastes good, it must be mine. Dynasty decapitated, you just might see a ghost tonight. And if you don't know now, you know. I'm taking back the crown. I'm all dressed up and naked. I see what's mine and take it. Oh yeah, the crown.
Guys, so I have a question for you. So,
Yes.
where did the name Demon Phil come from?
I've had several people that have kind of passed that one by, so I'm happy that you brought that up. Actually, I started writing a book. Golly, it's been like 17 years ago, I believe, is whenever I started writing this. The main character's name in there is Demonstricus, which is a very long, name and everything. The story is based on a 14th century mage turned vampire, and that was his name whenever he went into the vampiric role. But whenever of course, I deal a lot in the comics and things, and there was a particular creator that was out there that I was on one of his lives in the comment section, and he went to answer one of my questions, and he tried to pronounce my name, and he said, "You know what? From now on, we're calling you Demon." And I was like, "You know what? That sticks. I can do Demon Phil. I'm good with that."
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I like that. And curious, but because in the second book, you'll meet him later in Book of Souls if you haven't met him yet. But the shapeshifter in the second book is named Mr. Phillips.
Nice.
Yeah. So Philip,
there we go.
Demon Phil. Yeah.
There we go. It's almost like looking in a mirror, but backwards.
Yeah. Think about that for a minute.
Exactly. Like things to make you go, interesting. I know after reading into this and getting about halfway through or pretty close to it on this book, on Book of Souls, and then I was frantically looking because I was like, okay, I got this one. Let me go ahead and get Book of Demons, because I saw that you did a post on that one. And then I was like, wait a minute, this one's not out yet. How long do I have to wait? So how long are we having to wait for Book of Demons?
It'll be out on October 11th.
Woohoo, coming up quickly.
Yeah, coming up quickly. Because, that was one of the things they said, typically you'll wait a full year. And I was like, I don't want to wait a year. And one of the things we're doing too, and it should be out in November, is we're doing a duology. So it's going to be one book with both books in it.
Oh, yes.
And I thought to myself, I was like, why didn't I do that originally? Because, because I think like I said to you a little earlier, is like I started doing book clubs, and they were, and everybody was like, I love the ending, and the Book of Souls is contained because but when is that sequel coming out? And I'm like, well, the sequel's done. It's just, and I didn't want to wait. I didn't want anybody to wait too long that was interested. Right. So I think it's like the first one came out in March, and this one will be out October 11th, just in time for Halloween.
Nice. Very nice. I mean, it's perfect timing for this kind of storyline too, because like I said, this one it'll raise the hair on your body somewhere, somehow, some fashion. It'll happen. You just can't read it and just go, I feel calm about everything. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's what I like. That's what I hope for. I want, people. I was out with a friend the other night, and he was like, he was asking me about the Book of Demons, and he said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack in the Book of Souls and I said, yeah, it is. The Book of Demons is a little more. It's a little different in the fact that it's more the battle of good and evil. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's like mono on mono, and it's just because the world has already been built in the Book of Souls. So the second book, I was able to just let it ride, and it's fun. I think it's a very, very different. Again, it stands on its own, but you'll see some of the stuff. But you don't necessarily have to read the Book of Souls in order to understand the Book of Demons. It stands on its own. But I think it's kind of cool if you do, because you see Jack's arc.
But that is interesting that you said that, because that was going to be a question I was going to ask is, could it be standalone as well? Because you may have someone who will jump in and accidentally, because, they see Demon and they're like, ooh, that one looks actually interesting. Because they're like, well, will it do that? Me included. I am definitely one of them. Yeah. So you want to be able to have that opportunity to at least read it and go, I like this. I'm hooked on this. Wait a minute, there's more. And then you can actually go back. So that's good that you actually have it where you can You can almost do the Star Wars type thing where you're doing, oh, I can go back to the prequel if I want to.
Yeah, that was the goal for both books to stand on their own. Like the storyline, the main storyline is finished in both books. And so far, like, how you send books out ahead of time, and everybody who's read it so far that have also read the Book of Souls is saying that, like, it's nice to read both books, but the Book of Demons will stand on its own.
Excellent. So, now, we got Book of Souls, Book of Demons. Is there any more that's going to be going into this arc, or are you just going to go ahead and close this one out and move on to something else afterwards? What's the plans on that?
Well, curiously enough, like I wrote a Christmas book 4 years ago. And it's Christmas stories, 7 original short stories, and they're like just 7 short stories about Christmas. And it's more of, it's funny because one of the publishers that had looked at it said it's very lachrymose, and I disagreed with them. I just think it was very real short story Christmas stories. They're not Hallmark stories, unfortunately, because it would be great to sell them to Hallmark, but they're just like real, like real people, But as far as this storyline is concerned, no, Jack Kelly, there's a variety of ways to go with him. And again, because I do lucid dream, I have a whole ton of notes because he's come to me in a dream with a specific creepy thing going on. And so I've been messing with that. And I'm also, I've got two other books that I'm working on. One of them is about global warming, but it's told from a romantic comedy, and there's a ghost in it, of course, because I can't seem to not have a ghost or some kind of spirituality in all my books. So so anyway, the thing with Jack Kelly is like, there's room to continue.
Excellent. And you saying that you have, the paranormal thing and all of your stuff, that's great, because then you can truly call yourself a ghostwriter, and you mean it at the point.
Exactly. I don't know why. I mean, I just like, there's been always that there's either an element of spirituality in everything I wrote, even if it's a detective story. Like one of the stories I'm working on right now is about a female detective in Los Angeles. And it's the spirituality all through the book. And the story, Hot and Getting Hotter, is, they're just, it's about the greenhouse effect, but there's and it's hopefully going to be a romantic comedy, but there's a ghost in it.
Nice. Sounds like an interesting concept to kind of give you different angles to look at things, instead of just going straight at it with just, tunnel vision on one thing. You got to kind of look around the complete whole picture on there to see what's happening. I like that.
And I would like to really continue with Jack Kelly, because he's like it's one of those things where I kind of I'm feeling a rhythm with, right. But I don't know. It's like you. I'm sure you've got 100 things you want to do, and there's only so much time.
Very true. Well, plus you also have to look at, whenever you're presenting it to a fan base, you have to make sure that it's not just absolutely shoved down their throat and, in trough style. You actually want to give it to them little by little, so that they keep coming back for more.
Yeah. No, I know, because I've been paid to write stuff. And for me, I feel like, I don't want to sound like a D-bag here, but like, I feel like I'm more of a method writer. Like, I really have to feel it. I really want those characters have to come to life for me. I want to spend every day with them, not like I've got this formula that's working and I just kind of, like you're saying, shoving it out there. And I'd rather it end with 2 books and people really liking the characters than having a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th book and they go, yeah, he kind of lost something along the way. And it's because I wasn't really feeling it, if that makes sense.
Oh, exactly. Absolutely. So let me ask, while you're writing these things, is there something that you're using for inspiration while you're doing this? Some form of music, podcast, TV show, anything like that?
Well, I try not to, because somebody also told me in one of the book clubs, they said, oh, have you seen the show Stranger Things?
Right.
And I said, I haven't. And they said, your book kind of reminds me of it a little bit. there's like some similarities, I guess.
Elements, yeah.
So I try not to, when I'm writing something, I try not to have to watch anything that's similar or even in the same genre, because I'm
Right.
like, I don't, not that, of course, we all borrow from each other, but I don't want to be too influenced on that.
Right.
But as far as like when I was writing the Book of Souls, there was, I definitely listened to music. I definitely listened to sounds. I think for 5 days I had my earplugs were filled with just rain and thunder, because like, it was like sort of helping me get into the mood for this one scene. And then in another one, I was listening to Arabic music, because it was like, it was also helping. And then also, I think very early, you have had to have read that scene the first time he experiences and it overwhelms him down in the subway when he's picking up voices and seeing stuff. I really was listening to Kamana Barana, because I've always loved that. And so that was helping me with his placement, walking downstairs, picking something up. What is the sound? So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I love to listen to, especially music and sound.
Excellent. And that's cool, because you're actually you're creating that environment to actually get more involved in that piece. And I like how you're saying that it's per piece on there. Like if there, certain chapter about a certain element on there, there's something that you're doing differently, instead of just a generic, it's always this one thing and that one thing only.
Yeah. And even though he, the beginning of the book is like the setting in Los Angeles, right, where his son is sick and he's in the hospital. Well, I was listening to Rain, because I just felt like all of a sudden he's starting to see shadows, and the shadow people are coming. And that was really helpful for me to make it dark, even though the setting was light, if that makes, you know what I mean? Like it just kind of making my brain think differently.
Well, you have to, because even though the character may be seeing some light, physically type thing inside, back behind the eyelids, that's where the darkness is that the character can't see at this point. So there's it's almost like an onion. I mean, there's layers upon layers on what you've got on there. So you actually have to be in those spaces of layers in order to write it correctly. And you're definitely hitting that.
Yeah. It's exactly what you were saying, because like what I was trying to get to was like where you said behind the eyelids, right? Like, cause I think there's a line that Jack says, I don't know if he says it out loud, but it's in his head. And he says, the real haunted houses are in our head, right? I mean, that's where really the majority of our demons live. And so, so yeah, like I try to use sound to bring that stuff out.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, let me ask you, we're coming into spooky season, right around the corner. Absolutely love this time of year. I'm sure you kind of enjoy this, because of the element of what you're writing and everything up here. Go ahead and give me one or two of your favorite horror movies.
Okay, so for me, my all-time favorite, and I think I touched on this maybe a little earlier, is The Exorcist. Because, before you see anything, you're like 45, 50 minutes, maybe 60 minutes into that movie. And it's just like you were talking about earlier, the peeling of the onion. It's just that like opening. And isn't it psychology? Like there's a medical thing that's wrong with her. And, it's just the music. And I think that film is set in fall, And so, and I remember being a kid and being scared crapless the first time I went to the theater to see that movie. And, when you heard that music, it just kind of brought you to that place. So yes, The Exorcist is definitely one of my favorite. And then there's two, I know I mentioned Rosemary's Baby, where the movie, I mean, whatever you think about Roman Polanski, I mean, I think that was sort of like a masterpiece, because there was so many things. You never see the baby.
Right.
It's all those like little hints of stuff. But there was this movie called Waking the Dead. And it was, I don't know if it was sort of like a psychological thriller. It's like, he's a politician, she's an activist, and she's dead. She dies, right? Supposedly in a blast in a car, in an accident. but he keeps seeing her. And so you, as an audience member, you're saying, well, is she still alive? Or isn't she? So, or is it all in his head? Because, like the title says, he's waking the dead. So I like those two. So those, I would say, are three things that I really like.
Nice. I mean, those are good ones because, like you said, it's more of the psychological. It's definitely not the gore factor. And that's one good thing that I'm actually enjoying with the horror industry right now is that they're finally starting to make that switch slowly, where they're getting out of the 100% gore factor on every single thing they throw out there, and they're going back to the psychological. I like that.
Yeah. And I think in this country, like years ago, especially in movies, right? I think it was more of, like Psycho. Like if you, there's so many other things going on underneath, and I was never a big fan of the slasher movies because I was like, it definitely sucks to have walked in on, like a nightmare scenario where somebody is, but it's much more interesting to be alone in a house or, where something is going on and you're trying to figure out what it is, or is somebody following you or aren't they following you? Is it that person's mind that this is unraveling, that kind of stuff.
It's the doubt. I mean, that goes right side by side with fear because you start having doubts as soon as you start having fear, you start having doubts. I mean, it's a double-edged sword all the way around. They play well off of each other whenever it's done correctly in the movies with that. And there's been several of them that have done that very well.
What about you? What are your two?
Oof. Oh, we're going to get into this. All right. Because I made my big list for 31 Days of Halloween.
Okay.
So as far as one of my top ones is Trick or Treat. Simply because I believe it's four different stories. It's either 4 or 5. But I love how they go. It's almost like set up like an anthology of stories. Back like what they did with Twilight Zone, the movie, where they had the different stories and then it tied in. This one does the same thing, but it messes with your mind whenever it does it. It's like, where did I miss that? How could I have possibly overlooked that particular scenario? So that is definitely up there with one of my top ones. And another one is kind of obscure, is called The Burrowers. It was back in early 2000s, I believe, is whenever it came out. It is a Western. It is classified as a Western, but it is a Western horror because they really don't ever really show the creatures or whatever they are, but they're underneath the ground and they grab these people and pull them underneath, and all you see is parts of them unburied, and they put this paralysis poison into them to where they're buried alive. That is freaky.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Whenever you start thinking about that kind of thing. Plus, it's in the Old West, so how are you going to counter that?
Yeah. No, it's true. I think I've seen that one like years ago, and is the minute you started talking about it, I was like, yeah, I've seen that movie. Oh, there's so many good ones. Did you ever see Lincoln the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, yes.
I don't know, like, when I first saw the title, I was like, oh, this is going to be junk. And then I watched it. I loved it. It was great. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those that makes you go, should I go look at my history book and see if I missed something in there by chance?
Which, I don't know if you ever read this book. It was really interesting. It's called Lincoln at the Bardo. Lincoln in the Bardo. Very good. Another one of those, like, I mean, it's a, no, there's a lot of good stuff out there if you really want some good stuff. There was a movie, God, a long, long time ago. And I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was about I want to say, I think it was like Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice. It was about this woman who would lure these housekeepers, and she'd have this gorgeous garden.
Yes.
And the reason for the garden was because she was a serial killer and she was using. Yeah. So, no, there's some good stuff out there.
Oh, absolutely. And it's refreshing to see that, you can go and you can, as long as you're willing to do a little bit of work and look into some things and try to look for these kind of things, they're out there. And if you go back to some of the original stuff that's out there, it really showcases above and beyond some of this other stuff that's put on a pedestal. I'm not saying that not all of it is not good. Of course, I mentioned one of them, it's early 2000s, so that technically is not in the same time frame of a lot of the other ones. But you never know what you got until you try it, for one thing. But just kind of look into it and look for reviews. What people were talking about, and always, 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 whenever you're looking at a review, look at what said negative first, then go to the positives, because they can pay for the positives to be up there and wipe out the negatives if they need to.
Yeah, no, true. And you mentioned something long time, you mentioned the movie The Twilight Zone, but
Yes.
that show, and that is all like really scary stuff, but all of it is psychological.
Oh yeah.
It's all psychological thrillers, and he was a master,
Oh, absolutely.
And I grew up on that. So like, yeah, I just love that stuff.
Now I got to ask you, next question I'm going to ask you kind of off the wall on this one is, what is your favorite color M&M?
My favorite color M&M.
We only ask the good questions on this show.
No. And you know what? What I like, my favorite M&Ms are the dark chocolate M&Ms and definitely the black.
There you go. All right. It's kind of like Squid Game, except we don't have a revolver behind you or anything. So, it's got the ejecto button on here, but you're still okay.
Yeah, love that show too.
Well, I mean, you've got momentum going with what you got here. In order to get your book, I've actually got the link. All the links are embedded, by the way, in the feed, so you can quickly, easily go over there. But on Amazon, you can go over there and get the book. That's where I got mine. I got the digital form on mine. I definitely want to get the physical. It's just something about opening up a book and having it just flow between your fingers and the smell of the pages and all that. It really amps it up. But to have this much that I enjoy it digitally, I can only imagine, a physical copy in my hands, how much I'm going to be sitting there going, ooh, or I may toss the thing across the room because it scares me that bad. I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I know. We're coming to the final on the audio version of the Book of Demons, and it's fun for me to listen. And we're using the same narrator, Luke Wellen, and so for me, it's been like, because I've been removed from it for such a long time, and then all of a sudden now I've got to go through and listen to the audio and words and stuff. So yeah, I like audio. I've been, to tell you the truth, I'm with you on the hard, a covered book. And I think it comes like, I can put my finger on it. Like I was in third grade, we were getting ready to read the book Flowers for Algernon. I don't know if you've ever read that, but
heard of it. I haven't read it.
And for some reason, my nun had me open the box and take the books out. And I remember touching them and feeling them and handing them out to the kids in the class going, there is nothing like a book.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, I completely agree.
Audio now.
If I had the room, would be one thing. I mean, that's a huge thing because I don't have, a huge library. Virtual library, I have a pretty good size, but everybody has a good size virtual library pretty much. Yeah. But the books they just have it's almost like they have a pulse right in front of you while you're holding them and while you're going through the story. And I can definitely see where that would happen. Oh, and you've got it right there. Oh, that is just teasing. Oh, it's not good.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting twist that you got on there. And the next thing I want to kind of bring up for us to discuss briefly is, if, let's say hypothetically, because I could see it happening, let's say Netflix, Hulu, somebody picks it up and says, look, I want to go ahead and make something out of this. Do you prefer movie or series out of this?
Series.
Go with series?
Yeah. I just think because, and again, because like the Book of Souls, I feel like there's so much going on there that you would have to cut. To do a 2-hour movie, you would have to cut so many elements of it out, and I know what they would focus on strictly alone, and that would be just Jack and Casper Greenstreet, which is fine because I love both of those characters. But I just think a series, you would be able to flush it, and you'd be able to get a lot of the nuances. And for me as a writer, I would love that. I would much prefer a series.
I completely agree with you, because as you're talking about that, and as soon as you mentioned about, as much content is in there and you'd have to cut it down to 2 hours, there's one that comes to mind, and it's still one that hurts everybody as soon as they hear it. But Stephen King's It, the book was so much better than the TV miniseries movie thing that they had on there. I mean, it was still good. Don't get me wrong; it still scared the crap out of quite a few people, but nothing like the book. I'm telling you, if they would have actually gone with a series on this and run that way back then, like they could have done today, whew, that would have had people in some serious psychological issues now.
Yeah, and the beauty of things like Netflix and all of these streaming services is like you can it doesn't have to be watered down like old network TV was. You know what I mean? You can just really put it out there.
Right.
And for me too, it's like you've got like the artwork, and Casper. One of the things I felt was very important about because Casper was always going to be the spirit, the ghost that was haunting the apartment 3C, but he was never going to be as big as he turned out to be. And I just felt like at some point I was like, I have to show him before he became a ghost, because then you understand why he's so ferocious as a ghost.
And I like how you're setting that up with that and having the foreshadowing, but the story building at the same time, because it's kind of a choice made by some people who write whenever you're going through, and it's a missed opportunity, because it's one of those things where watch what's happening in this hand, don't look over here, and look, that just happened. Before you know it, it's already slapped you in the face, and you're like, where did that come from? And it was right in front of you the entire time.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the most fun part for me of writing. Like, I'm not clever enough to be strictly technical, I'm just, so I have to it has to come to me like that too. I have to feel it like the way you're describing it. That's the way I want them to introduce themselves to me when I'm writing them,
Absolutely. Next question is, I mentioned kind of at the beginning of this that, of course, the main audience that I've had in the past has always been around comics. And I'm starting to go into the pop culture, wrestling. Of course, we're going into, the author's world, different things like that. So I got to ask you, what's one of your favorite comics that you can remember?
Well, I am always going to be partial to Batman. I liked the comic. I liked the Campy 60s show. I think he's the best when they do the superheroes. When a new Batman's coming out, I like it because there's two different there's a lot of things going on with Batman, and he's not Superman. He can't fly. So he's got to be clever and get his gadgets and stuff like that. So I would definitely say Batman always appealed to me. That was the one. When I was going to buy a comic, I would buy them, the Batman comics. I mean, I like Superman too. You can't not. And Spider-Man is fascinating too because, but I don't remember buying any Spider-Man as a kid. And I don't know why that was now. But I mean, definitely Batman.
Nice. Now, because I am, Demon Phil's in the name and everything, I'm kind of partial to the opposite side of that spectrum from the hero. What is one of your favorite villains?
Well, I think Batman does have the best villains too. And, I would say like, I kind of feel like it's an obvious choice, but the Joker, but I always like the Riddler.
Yes.
I always like the Riddler, and I don't know if he ever, and I guess because they've become so huge film wise that like I'm trying to go back to the comics, and it's like it's kind of not letting me get fully back into that period for me.
Right.
Because once the movies come out, I love them, and I don't know why. The Joker has always seemed to do the best, and of course, Catwoman is can't go wrong.
No, not at all. I'm going to go ahead and I will allow that one to go straight across there. Absolutely. But Joker you're talking about, you picked two right off the bat that are psychological. I mean, psychological, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But Joker was one of those that you never knew what was going through the mind. And with Riddler, well, Google couldn't keep up with what was going through his mind.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I do. Yeah. Obviously. Yeah. I do like that. Yeah. And
No,
that's the thing
those
about a bad guy, because, like the comics, right? Creating like some of the most amazing bad guys of all time.
oh yeah, absolutely, and continuing to do so. And now there's a lot in the indie side of thing that they're really starting to get more and more spotlight and get some things out there that people never knew about. Back in the '90s, whenever Image was absolutely overly expanding and everything, people knew a lot of the characters that were there, and then it kind of fell off in the 2000s, and now we're getting some more now later this time around with what happened 2 years ago. There was a certain year that nobody likes to say the year's name because of what happened. I got to ask you, as far as that was concerned, how important did you find it that you had to have a social media presence and not just a physical presence at that point?
Well, it's interesting, because obviously, as you can see, I am a man of a certain age. So, and that's one of the things publishers and agents will ask you. They're like, how big is your social presence?
Right.
And it's kind of like, I mean, I get it intellectually, but from a point of view as trying to create something, like you're creating podcasts and other stuff that you do, right? To have that weight on the merit of the book is like, how big is your social presence?
Right.
I I don't know if I don't think I was on it any more than I during that period, to tell you the truth,
Mhm.
um, than I am now, and I'm not on it all. I mean, I love. This is what I love about Facebook. For me personally, I am
Mhm.
friends with kids that I was in first grade with in, a long time ago. And so being able to keep up with them and, family that you would never have seen, because like I was an East Coaster. So being out in California, to me, that's the best of it. Do you know what I mean? Like you see somebody who's a grandfather now and loving it and a grandma now, or, they were just retired, and or they hit something on their bucket list, and that kind of stuff is great for me, because I still am trying to get across with the books, like on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know, does anybody really care? Do they want to see this? Like, so I don't know if I answered your question, but
Oh yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So kind of branching off what you said with all that and everything, I want to ask you a question. Is you've got some experience underneath your belt with some writing and with some experience on successfully getting some stuff out there and continually getting the momentum out there. What is some of the best advice that you would want to give to aspiring writer out there?
So for me, like when I was in my 20s, I had a literary agent and I was trying to write screenplays. And I was trying to write stuff that I thought would sell, because that's what the agent would say. No, you got to be able to pitch something that's, what worked for me, being able to write, two novels and a short story and a play, is because when it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I wake up and I get out of bed and go downstairs and want to visit those characters, it's got to be important to you. So don't try and write something that's probably the worst bit of advice. Don't try to write anything that you think is going to be saleable. Write something that you have to say, like something that you really want to say, that there's a character that keeps tugging at you saying, put me down. Like I've got a story to say.
Mhm.
Or even if it's a nonfiction, if you're writing something about a period in your life, you're doing a memoir, but you have to write it. That would be the best advice. Don't try and be marketable. I mean, you want to be marketable, but that can't be the reason why you're sitting down to write.
Right.
Because most of us out here are not going to make a lot of money writing, and so you have to love it. you have to love something about it.
Exactly. I mean, I completely agree with you on that one. It's you don't want to go ahead and put all the focus on dollar signs in front of the name of whatever work you're working on. It completely changes everything. And that's the way you have to kind of look at it is, do you want it known for the name that's out there, or do you want it named for the dollar sign before the name? That's what you're saying there, and that's exactly how people need to look at it. Is it looks a lot better if it's just the name.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm coming from a point of view where I'm a little older, where I raised kids, I have kids that are, in their 20s, and my daughter's actually getting married next month. And so for me to sit down and really invest in something, I want to fall in love with my characters. I mean, I think it's so important, because you won't do them a disservice, or
Right.
yourself, and you'll enjoy it. And I mean, I know it's a cliche, but it isn't like it really is about the journey, not getting to the end of the line, that trip. Like if you take a road trip and you're driving from LA to New York, and the only two things that you notice is LA and New York, wow, you missed a lot.
Yes.
And I think it's the same thing with anything you're doing, whether you're painting or writing or singing or,
So one of the last questions I want to ask you on this one is going to be, you've worked on some books, you've gotten them out there, your name is on there. I got to ask, how does it feel on your first one to not only have it where it's accepted is one thing, that's one feeling, but to actually have the book in your hands for the first time with your name on there? How did that feel?
Yeah, it felt pretty, I have to say, it felt pretty cool. It was like one of those things where you surprise yourself, because I was like, I don't know if I could write a novel. I mean, I never wrote a novel. I wrote a couple of screenplays that had been optioned. I wrote a play, and then I wrote a little book of short stories, the Christmas stories, but they were like, 20-page stories. And I was like, to actually sit down and write a novel, and then to see it, because that was my escape as a kid. Whatever chaos was going on in my house or in my neighborhood or in my life, when you picked up a book and got into a character, it was great. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was like realizing, like, no matter how old you are, it doesn't matter. Like, something will bring you joy. And yeah. And so I
Nice.
think, I felt pretty happy.
That is what I am working towards on mine. One thing I didn't tell you about mine is the sad story. The sad part of the story is that I'm very retentive about. I always make sure I have a backup to a backup to a backup, just in case you lose something online. And I had two external hard drives along with the computer. The computer had an issue. Two external hard drives ended up they were both corrupted. So I lost everything to my book, and I was like 2 chapters away from finishing the book.
Oh my God.
Everyone has that exact same thing.
Oh my God. I
So,
feel so bad for you.
so cut to 2019, whenever I'm introduced to the comic industry and start talking to people and everything. I've several people have heard this story, and I've gotten the same response from them. And then I started thinking, I was like, I can either start completely over, because I still got, the majority of it in my head. I can still write the thing. But then I started thinking, I'm in the comic industry already. Why not go ahead and adapt it as a graphic novel or a series, comics, and do it that way and try something different. So that's what I'm actually trying to do. So it's going to be something totally different on that end. Whether or not I choose to go ahead and adapt that to a novel after, it's gone to comic form, I just want to get to that point where I actually have it in my hands. It says that that's got my name on it. That's going to be my grail at that point. People talk about their comic grails and all that. Mine is to actually show that I started something and finished it and have it physically in my hands to show that. So whenever I asked you that question, that's what I was getting towards, because that is my aspiring goal that I am getting toward, just to have that physically in my hands whenever it is completed.
Yeah, I'm rooting for you. I hope you get there too. And like, when you told me you lost it, I was like, oh my
Oh
God.
yeah.
I've done that sometime where I thought like, oh, it didn't save. And then I was like, oh, F, and then two blank letters and a K. But yeah, no, you know what it does? I think it makes you feel joyful and like a boy. Even if somebody would say, even if I'm happy that I'm getting the response that I am from Book of Souls, but when somebody gets it, like when they really get it, then it gives me joy. But that was what feeling it for the first time. I was like, wow, I actually wrote a novel. And I had gone to my high school reunion about 5 years ago. And one of the girls that I was really good friends with in high school said to me, you always said you were going to write a novel. And so I was like, yeah, that's right. I did say that. And so getting to do it, like, it's like, and I don't know, I became a yoga teacher when I was in my mid 50s. So I just feel like there's this time, if you put the energy into something, you can do it.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. And I applaud you for going ahead and pushing yourself to that end, because it's successful. As far as I'm concerned, Book of Souls is a book that you need to get a hold of. Everybody that's watching this, that will be watching this later on, because I know we're pre-recording and everything now, but you definitely want to get a hold of this. Book of Demons will be coming out afterwards. Like he said, they are standalones, but they work better together. They don't have to be. But you did say in November, if I'm not mistaken, that you're going to have the duality version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That one, I'm very tempted on that one, because that way I have everything all together in just one big. Oh yeah, that's the way I want to be able to read that thing, and just go through the whole thing, and then be able to say, okay, I'm done, and just start back over all over again.
Yeah. We're excited about it. We're just picked out cover.
Nice, very nice. Well, Kevin, it has been great having you on here and being able to discuss this and trying to find out a little bit more about you and your interest and what kind of, makes you tick, as well as you're doing all of the writing as well, very successfully at that, I might add. So you've got Book of Souls, Book of Demons is coming out very shortly, the duality version. You still have the Christmas book that's on there, that, as everyone knows right now, there is a certain holiday that comes before Christmas. So everybody get out there and celebrate Halloween, not Christmas first. Don't go to your retail stores and tell them Halloween first, not Christmas.
Yep. I'm with you on that.
Go ahead and check out these books. Then make sure you look at his Christmas book. And we might even see if we can have him on as a return guest in that time of year and talk about that book. We'll have to see what happens with that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Excellent. Well, go ahead and let them know, if you will, one last time, who you are, what you do, where they can find you, and go ahead and give them that pitch and let them know they need to get this book.
Okay. So Kevin Moore, you can get the books anywhere. They're everywhere. You can get them online anywhere. We made sure that they could be in small mom and pop bookstores. It's not exclusive to just the giants. You can find me at kevinmoorepublishing.com. You can find me on Facebook under the same thing, kevinmoorepublishing.com, or just Kevin Moore. Instagram, Kevin Moore Publishing, and reach out. I do book clubs, and I love to engage. And this has been a pleasure, Phil.
Awesome. I certainly appreciate you being on here. I am looking forward to having you back, and I will be delving into the rest of this book to finish this up here shortly, and then looking forward to Book of Demons, because Demon Phil, come on, I got to have Book of Demons in my hands. That has to happen.
Absolutely.
But let me go ahead. Thank you again for being here. I'm going to go ahead and drop you backstage shortly. Go ahead and finish up with my closing statements, and then I will see you here shortly if you want to hang around.
I'll hang around.
All right. All right. So we had a great show. We had Kevin Moore up here talking about writing an actual, a full-sized, like, thick book. Comics are great and everything. And by the way, there's this whole myth going out there, and I think it's true, that if you open up those fancy covers, there's actually a story inside of the comics. I'm just throwing that out there. It may be something you could bust later on. Look into it and see. But we're talking about books where it's actually got words. I know it's difficult at times, but it's worth it whenever you go through and you immerse yourself into a story that actually transfers you into what's going on. Now, I always have a closing statement, and today's not going to be any different with that. It's always based on my guest and something that was said on there, and it's always based on pretty much one word on there. Today's is going to be focus. What I want to go ahead and talk about is the focus that's on there. we talked about it a little bit. We kind of danced around it on some other topics throughout the show today. Focus is all about where you're putting your vision, where it's going. We mentioned about tunnel vision and looking in one direction and missing out on what's going on the sides. Whenever you focus, you want to make sure that you actually focus is fine, but you want to broaden that spectrum if at all possible. You never know what you're missing unless you open both eyes and look in every direction possible. That being said, don't just look at something and think that it's not going to be something that you're going to enjoy, something that you're going to enjoy getting into. Maybe it's something you haven't tried before. Adjust your focus. It might just, change how you see things. So, for lack of better terms, and yes, I'm going to kind of throw this out there to finish this up, but don't judge a book by its cover. I said it. It's like a dad joke, I know, but it works. Don't judge a book by its cover. Do not miss out on Book of Souls. Book of Demons is coming up next. I'm so giddy about that one. And we will be having fun looking at the rest of this as it goes along. Hopefully be able to get Kevin back on the show to talk more about his upcoming projects as they come about, and we'll see how things evolve around him. So until next time, go ahead and keep in mind, you need to go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss anything on the channel. Please like if you like this video. It helps us move forward in the algorithms and help other people kind of recognize what's going on. And the most important thing is share. It costs absolutely nothing to use the power of the finger, the correct one, and hit that share button to go ahead and share this out so that everybody has a chance to look and see what's going on. So thank you again for being here. It's been an honor being back on this show, talking to y'all, having a great guest on here in Kevin Moore. So until then, keep it into y'all.
Settle into sockets, flip the switch and watch them run. Oh!